All right, so I want to make a little video to kind of talk a little bit about Vue and what are my thoughts on Vue and is Vue worth learning or using. I will say that if you go to my channel like a long time ago, I used to make some Vue content. Now I don't know how to easily find it because the filtering on YouTube videos is not that great. Like where's the search bar here? It's not here, so oh, I guess it's over here. So if I search my channel for Vue, I mean I have a couple of Vue tutorials. Like I started building some smaller components with Vue. I built like a full stack application with Vue. And this was all in Vue 2. This is like 2 years ago. And my experience using it was actually pretty good. I really liked it. I would say that the syntax is a little bit weird for the templates in my opinion, but it's nothing that you can't learn, right? The reason I kind of like React's templates a little bit better is because everything's just like JavaScript, which I mean, you can argue it makes the templates look ugly. But in Vue, there's things that I like, there's things I don't like. So I'm just going to kind of talk about some of these things. And you guys can call me out if I'm saying something that seems like I shouldn't be complaining about. So right off the bat, I mean, I created a Vue project with Vite. And after you create it, some of the things that I like about Vue is that all of your components are in a single file, right? So you know all the scoping and all the styling for that component is in this file. There's like, if you use React, there's thousands of ways that you could potentially style your components. There's like style components. There is tailwind. There's CSS modules. There's like inlining CSS. There's like emotion. There's just so many different ways to style React, and it's really kind of overwhelming and kind of pointless to have all these different ways. Vue, I like it's kind of just like right off the bat, you just have CSS, right? And coming from a traditional standpoint, like that's a beautiful thing because you just have to worry about learning CSS. You don't have to worry about anything else. You can also, I believe, change this to like Sass if you wanted to, which is another great post-processing, or is it pre-processing? I don't know. Styling language built on top of CSS that allows you to like do nesting, right? So I could do like at hover here, and then I could potentially put this logic here, right? And I would personally use Sass if I was going to like make a Vue project because Sass just gives you a lot more benefits. But there's nothing wrong with just pure CSS as well. And I do like how you can just put the scoped tag here and like all this styling will be completely scoped to your component and you know it won't affect any other component in your application. That was one of the main reasons why we use like something like BEM, the BEM paradigm to basically scope our things so that we don't potentially affect styling throughout our whole application. So yeah, the single file components I like. Now, one thing I don't like about the single file components is like if you just need a small little component that you just need to use on this page, you have to make a new file. That's something I'm not a big fan of. Like I wish in React you could easily just make like a new function and a new component and just use it. With Vue, I believe you have to make a new Vue file, which just an extra like right click, make a new file, scaffold it out, which is kind of a pain in my opinion, but hey, it's not too bad. For the script area, I like how you can say lang equals TS and then like you automatically get TypeScript support. That's been pretty nice. Now I have been working on like a side project, this game I kind of talked about, and it's in Vue. I will say that some of the things that would have complained to me, like for example, I just put a component here called hello, and off the bat, my editor is not yelling at me, right? There's nothing called hello here. So that's something that maybe I just need to work further setting up my Vue, config or something to have it yell at me. But there's some things that I've noticed when working with Vue that like auto importing stuff doesn't work. You know, making stuff red when this should not be a component called hello here doesn't do anything. Not a fan of that. Now let's talk about the actual syntax of stuff. So let's just go ahead and do this. Make sure we can go to our page. The syntax of Vue, especially Vue3, if you're using the composition API, which I would recommend using because it just seems like it's more concise. If you use this setup term, there's a lot of stuff that like you don't have to put anymore. And there's stuff that's just like kind of made global, I believe. So one of the cool things about Vue is that if you need some data in your div, like if you need to render something, you could literally just make a constant here called like people. I can make an array and I'll put like Bob and Sally or something, right? And then inside of the template itself, this is a thing that I'm not really too big of a fan of. I do like React's use of .map because it's kind of it maps one-to-one with JavaScript. But in Vue, you have to do a special syntax that kind of reminds me of Angular. I'm not a fan of it, but hey, you get used to it, you learn it. And then the syntax of this is for person in people. Now, I don't know why you use the keyword in here, because if you're using JavaScript, the way they loop over an array is of. So for person of people. But they chose in for some reason. And there's just little like nuances of like you have to, if you want the index, I believe you do something like that. So like if I do index, and then I can also say person name. I'll just change this to name. How about that? So let's see if this works. I have them swapped. Obviously it's name and there's index. So a lot of my gripes are me just I haven't really memorized the syntax for some of these templating things. But it's pretty easy. If you look at the code, you can be the deciding factor to know, like, is this cleaner than React's mapping? Like, does it make more sense to say people.map name index, and then like make a div here that says name index, right? And then the syntax for interpolation is a little bit different. In React, we just use one curly brace, and Vue you use two, but just little subtle differences like that. So there's other stuff as well. Like let's say you wanted to, when you click on this div, you want to do something, right? So now we have the @ symbol, click, and then we could pass it some strings, which again, coming from a Vue standpoint, it's a little bit strange, but you can say handle click, and then you can go up here and you can make a function called, I'll say function handle click, like that, and we can just go ahead and console log clicked or something. So now if we go back to our code and click on some of these things, we see that clicked points out to the console. Pretty cool. And if you wanted to pass some information to here, like you could potentially pass in name directly here, like this, and I could say clicked name, and we can use that. There's something cool that I actually did like a couple days ago, actually yesterday, where built into Vue, it's very easy to like set up drag and drop. Now you might be able to do this in other languages as well. But you basically just say like draggable equals true, and then you can actually start adding listeners for like drag start, like this. And I can say handle drag start, get that event, and go ahead and make a function up here, function handle drag start, get that event. And we're gonna go ahead and just console log that real quick. So now if I click and drag Sally, notice that I get a drag event and I can do stuff with it. Okay, so some other things, let's see what else I can figure out. So let's say we wanted to like do something when we click on the name to like, I don't know, change the color or the styling or something. How would we do that? Well, in Vue, you actually have the ability to just make references, kind of like in React, we have a reference, but the reference is actually going to like re-render Vue and update the page when it changes. So like I could say people is actually a reference like this. I think I have to import it right there. So now this is actually like, I think a reactive thing, right? So like if I change the underlying array, then the page will also change. And I don't think it would have done that before. Like let's actually try that out. So like if I were to click on this and also keep track of the index that we clicked, which would be here, let's just do that. And we said people index is equal to people index plus an exclamation mark. Would that append an exclamation mark, and would that re-render the component and display that? I don't know. Well, let's try it out. So let's go here. Let's click on Bob, and notice that nothing happens, right? The onClick should be getting called right here, but I mean, let's just make this a number so it's not complaining at us. And let's also print this out just to make sure. Okay. So it is appending, you see it in here, but the page is like not displaying those exclamation marks. So basically, if you make this a ref, then Vue knows what to do to kind of like update this thing. And you have to say people.value here to kind of update that, which not a fan of that, but hey, you got to do what you got to do. It's the same as like React, where we say ref.current. But overall, I mean, like it's just a lot more concise, I believe. There's some things that are a little bit strange, like you have to do a computed in Vue if you want to basically computed. Like if I wanted to make a all caps people, right? I can make a computed, and this is actually pretty cool. Like if I say computed and then I go ahead and just give it a function like this, I could have this return people, and then I can map over it, and then I can say name dot to uppercase, like that. And I believe what this is going to do, if I put value here, is it's going to, every time people changes, it's going to capitalize everything in it. So if I go ahead and just like, instead of adding an exclamation mark, I add an A, if I wanted to use all caps as like a computed or derived, I could do that here, I believe. I'll say all caps. Okay, so now as I add characters, it's going to actually append a lowercase a here, but then the computed is going to react to basically this people array changing. It's going to recompute this and get a new array, and we can use that. I think there's also like a reactive keyword. I haven't really used it. I think I've used it once. Now some more things I like about Vue. I think if you look at their docs, I mean, their docs are great. I love the Vue's docs. Back when I started with Vue 2 and Vue 3, the docs are just very, very, they tell you everything you need to know, basically. I don't want to go to Vuex. Vue 3. So inside of Vue, like they have a really easy way to just make a store. So like, if I can get to the Vue docs, hold on a second. I'm here, I'm at the Vue docs. Let me find the search bar. Let me type in store. Okay, so out of the box, they have this cool way that you can basically make like a global store throughout your entire application. If I just make a file called store here and just paste in that code, I now have this thing that I can import and actually increment the count and do whatever I want, and that can be shared amongst all of my pages. So let's just go ahead and import store from store. Is that how you do it? I don't know if I have the absolute or relative path set up. Let's see. Let's try this. So now I should be able to basically, when I click on, let's just refactor this code just a little bit. Instead of doing all this, we are going to basically get rid of the for loop. And we're going to output store.count. Make sure you use double quotes. Okay. And I'll say handle click. Go ahead and call that. Delete these things. And we want to basically just have this store thing update. So I'll say store.count++. And if I delete all this other extra code that I'm not using anymore in this example, you should see, if I were to paste this in the right place, you should see this store thing update. Okay. But now I have this thing that I can actually share amongst all my components. So I didn't have to bring in Vuex. I didn't have to bring in like Redux. I didn't have to bring in all these state management libraries because there's a way built into Vue to basically share stuff. And Svelte does this as well. I like the fact that the less you have to download to like hit the ground running and build out components, the better. From using React, I mean, like they give you context, but to use context is super bloated. They even tell you that there's like performance issues with using context because it's going to like re-render the parent and all of the children that are wrapping that context or that are wrapped inside the context. There's just a bunch of overhead. But Vue is pretty concise and easy to kind of do what you need to do without having to pull in some extra stuff. Now, one thing I would say is kind of confusing about Vue is that you read through these docs and you're going to see some code that is going to look like there's two different APIs. There's a composition, I guess there's an options API. So you have to kind of make sure that, like, here's the other approach. There's going to be two different approaches to writing Vue, kind of like how React had class components for the longest time and then they switched to like functional components. The same thing with Vue. So you have to be kind of cognizant of like what you're reading, and you can potentially mix and match these things, I think. Instead of saying data here, that's, you know, an object that returns, or a function that returns a new object, I think we just use refs, right? So the composition API, you would just use refs, or you could potentially use reactives or stuff like that. The docs themselves, like they have like a setup function here, but the fact that I'm doing setup here basically makes this entire block, I believe, be my setup function, where you can declare like state and stuff like that. There's some other stuff that's kind of like confusing for a beginner. There's like the v on directive, but we use the @ symbol shorthand. So there, I think in Vue, there's a lot more ways to do the same thing, which can kind of be overwhelming. Like this could be potentially be v on :click, and I believe it'll work the exact same way as it did before. But it's just stuff like that that you're like, oh, it's kind of confusing. Like, which one am I supposed to use? So you might have to set up like a linter to make sure that you're using the proper ones. There's also like models. I do like the fact that we have access to 2A bindings. If you use React and you want to have an input here, like let's just go ahead and put an input like this. And let's say we wanted to have this thing update some state as we typed into it. Well, how do you do that? Well, you basically say v model, I believe, and you can point that to a reference. So if I were to add a reference here and say const, I don't know, I'll just say like name is equal to a ref of empty string. Let's just go ahead and re-import ref because I deleted it. But let's just go ahead and pass the v model to this. And basically what I can do is I can render out the name here below the input. And then when someone types like this, oops, let's refresh the page real quick. Now, I don't know why I had to refresh the page. That's kind of weird. Usually with Next and React, like this thing would have been hot module reloaded, or would it refresh for me? Don't know if I had like a little bug. But anyway, notice that when I type into the input, I automatically get this thing updated. Okay, it's a lot more convenient. It's a lot more concise than if you remember in React, you would have to add an onChange listener to this. Like you'd have to say onChange, and then you have to do some, I don't know, some garbage like this where you get the event and you say like set name is e.target.value, and you literally have that on every single input. And then you have to go over here and say like this would be a value is equal to a name like this. Okay, so there's some stuff in Vue that I do like. It's just a lot more concise. It's a lot more easier for a beginner to hit the ground running and start using, because they have like these awesome helper things that literally every web application is going to need. And bidirectional data flow is not always that bad as if you use it carefully. So I think it's pretty cool. And of course, like Vue has the ability to pass properties between components, right? So if I had made another component here, you can define some props like this. You can type them and you can specify, like if I were to try to bring this hello world component, this thing requires a message prop. So if I were to go ahead and go down here, just kind of start with that. I'll say hello world. Complaining. Now the messages are not very easy to understand. If you read through this TypeScript error, it's like you have no idea what this thing is complaining about. But the issue, I believe, is because you're not passing a message here. So I will say that I think the TypeScript feedback you get in React would have told you like you're missing something, and it wouldn't be that obtuse to understand. This error is very, very hard to read for me. I mean, maybe for a beginner, maybe for someone who's like been doing this for a while, could easily tell what this is, but like I can't. I just can't tell. So some stuff like that, which I don't know if that's because of the composition API or that's just because of something I've done with the setup, but that could use some improvement to have better error messages if that's even possible. But it might not be just the way that TypeScript is kind of done with this stuff. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I'm like missing, like some fundamental things? Like we have computed, we have shareable store state, main components, we got props. We already kind of showed you events. Like if this thing wanted to emit some type of event, I don't know if we still have that in Vue3. Like, is there a way to emit an event from a compositional? Oh, these are nice. Basically on your events, you can say like .prevent. So like I remember if you have a form, like let's say we have a form here and you wanted to do something when someone submits the form, like @submit equals, you know, run this function. We can actually say .prevent, and that'll just attach a e.prevent default so that it doesn't refresh the page, right? Very convenient just to add a .prevent to prevent the default behavior of something. I wish React had that. It doesn't. This is super nice to not have to like put it everywhere. Let's see what else. How do you, I'm trying to see how do you emit an event up. Vue3 composition, how to emit an event. Don't know if it's even possible. Okay, it looks like you can say define emits. So if I go back a little bit, at this point this video is becoming like a freaking tutorial about Vue, but if I go back, I can easily just say that this component emits a hello event. And when you do that, basically, I think React, that's another thing. It's not complaining about this. Like, I feel like this thing should have been required. Kind of weird. But now if I do @ symbol, we get a hello. Like, maybe there's a way to say that it's required here. I guess it doesn't matter. It's an event, so you can pick and choose if you wanted to listen to it. So hello, and this is going to call a function like hello event. Okay. Let's just go ahead and make that. And let's just print out some data that we get back, which I don't have. So I'll just go with data there. Go ahead and delete some stuff. Oh, message is gone. So let's just say like hello here. So now inside the hello world component, what we can actually do is, I believe when we were to like click on something, just add a click here, and we're going to call hello. Now, I don't know how you get that. Let's go down here and try to figure that out. Emit. So you can actually get it by saying emit is equal to this. And then we could say emit dot, let's see if we get any IntelliSense. We do not get IntelliSense. Oh, well, obviously because I don't know what I'm doing. If I did hello here, I can then emit hello. I think I could pass some data too, like 1, 2, 3. And I think that would then pass data, which would be a number. We should be able to print that out. So let's try that. Let's click on, go back to the page, and let's click on something. I don't know what I added it to. I added a click to here. Here it is. So now when you click on this thing, the child component is actually emitting an event up. Parent is listening for that event and calling this callback function where this child can do whatever it wants when that happens. Which this isn't anything different from React. I mean, like you can pass a callback function as a prop in React, and you can have the child component invoke it. So I don't think there's anything different here. I'm just kind of showing you a different syntax. It's a little bit different. But I do think that since there isn't really a way to type that event that I know of, like maybe there is. Like I wasn't getting the IntelliSense, right? So when I emit this thing, if I wanted to make this have a payload that was required of 1, 2, 3 or some type of number, I'm not really sure how to do that in TypeScript, but I'm sure there's a way to do it, I hope. But yeah, I mean, that's like a quick little overview of Vue and kind of my thoughts on it, and me just kind of talking about it and playing around with some of the features. Overall, I like it. It's concise. The reason I don't use it really is because I work with React full-time at work. So I don't really want to invest more time learning something that I'm not getting paid for. Like it's fun to build some side projects on it or using it. And it is kind of refreshing to do some of these things when I'm playing around with Vue on my side project. But again, like I'm not getting paid to work with Vue. So that's why I don't really make videos on Vue. Now, same thing with Svelte. Svelte is also very concise and it has like a really nice way to write code. I think Svelte and Vue are very similar, kind of. But there's a lot more that I want to kind of play with at some point. Like I want to check out Solid.js. I want to maybe build out bigger applications using Svelte. So I know I talked for a while. My overall recommendations is if you just learn like vanilla.js with like event listeners and whatever, and you just learn CSS and HTML, using Vue is probably going to be the easiest step forward to like start building out components and highly interactive applications, right? It's a lower learning curve, in my opinion, to go from vanilla.js and HTML, CSS to Vue than it is to go from that to React, okay? Although you do have to learn some of this weird syntax and stuff, which might trip you up a lot, I do think that Vue is a lot easier with these single components, and like it's just more beginner friendly, and the docs are really great as well. The React docs suck. I'll be honest. There's a beta React docs that are pretty good, but the React docs as is, like they're just not that good from what I remember reading through them. But I will also say that these Vue docs are kind of confusing when I look through them because they have like different ways to do different things. They show you examples with this setup stuff, but then the way I've learned Vue3 is use the setup keyword. So it would be nice if the examples actually showed you like code that looked like this instead of all of this. So that could be very confusing as well. Okay, here's an example. It shows you right here. Here's an example. And they kind of talk about why you can do it here, like why the setup thing works. But then I think if you scroll down, they go back to, oh no, they start giving you examples. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed my little talk, rant about Vue and my thoughts on it. Again, I like it. I just use React. So if you enjoyed this talk, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, press the bell icon, and like always, feel free to join my Discord if you want to find a place that you can ask questions that could help with your development journey or talk to me directly. Have a good day and happy coding.